Hello and welcome to Connections for Change. I'm Ebony Bowden, the Washington correspondent for the New York Post. It gives me great pleasure to introduce two HR titans of our Monash alumni community. First, we have Dimitra Manis, Chief Human Resources Officer for S&P Global, based in New York City. Good morning, Dimitra.
Morning, Ebony. It's good to see you.
Good to see you. And we also have Siobhan Martin, who is Aegon Asset Management's Global HRBP Director, coming to us from London. Thank you for joining us, Siobhan.
Hi, and actually I'm coming to you from Edinburgh. That's where my lockdown is happening. It's beautiful here.
Lucky you. Well, hello in Edinburgh. We're really grateful to have both Siobhan and Dimitra here virtually with us today, where our discussion will be focused on creating and maintaining vibrant company cultures in crisis. And I'd like to thank our Monash alumni community for submitting such robust questions on this topic. We're living in an unprecedented time. Many of us haven't been in our workplaces in over 2 months. Personally, I'm really missing my colleagues and the camaraderie, and I'm really interested to know, Dimitra and Siobhan, how you are maintaining a vibrant company culture in this crisis. Dimitra, I think I read that you are in charge of some 17,000 employees at S&P Global.
That's a good number. It's about 22, but it depends on which. We also have a partnership with another firm, so it's two publicly listed companies in one. So yes, and it's most of our employees, Ebony, are around maybe 60% of them are actually in India.
Oh wow!
So yeah, big number.
Dimitra, how have you been supporting your workforce during this time in really difficult circumstances? How is this playing out for you, and what have you been doing over the last few months?
Well, I think every HR person around the globe in every company is just working non-stop on coronavirus. I happen to be also the co-chair of the Coronavirus Steering Committee, which I was appointed to in January, which gives me sort of like hats. I would say we've spent a lot of time since January 27th, since we kicked off our steering committee, working on really putting our people and keeping them safe. We were very quick to action, got them all off, got them out of the workplace, out of public transport, and we've been working. 99.8% of our workforce has been working from home for at least 10 weeks straight. So that's a lot longer, obviously, for China and Hong Kong. So working really hard just to make sure that we engage our people through tons and tons of wonderful activities, which we can talk about later. But it's really good to see our employees just fully engaged and supportive of everything that we've done, and feeling incredibly safe. And I think that's really the number one key factor that we wanted to achieve. Business continues to function beautifully whilst we're managing from home.
Siobhan, the UK has seen really restrictive lockdowns as well. What are some of the challenges that you've been dealing with for the last few months, and what's been your approach to this lockdown?
Yes, indeed, you're absolutely right. And in fact, as we're speaking now, I know that the Scottish Government is talking to us about the changes that will happen here, because of course you may or may not know that the situation differs in different parts of the UK, which has made it slightly more confusing. But we have a workforce like Dimitra who are all around the world, so different situations in different countries too to manage. And that's been something that we've had to keep really tight and on top of. Same thing, the most important thing is that we keep our people safe, and that is the heart of everything that we do and all the decisions that we make. So taking that as the core has in a weird way made it a bit easier, because you've got a very strong guiding principle from which to begin. So financial services is being in huge turmoil because of the markets, everything all over the show. So it has put a great deal of strain on our business and on our people. And like Dimitra, I'm incredibly in awe of how people have coped with that. I sit on a number of other boards and groups outside of the company as well. So with the Institute and Faculty of Actuaries, the oldest church in the City of London with the charity Stonewall, the LGBTQI charity, and as well as working with Monash. So I'm privileged to be able to see all sorts of different industries and groups with the way that we've all had to change and develop. It's no different really in the faith community, in the charitable community, and people, the amazing actuaries who are working for governments all around the world to help make change. That there's a great deal of things that we can do. We can get into the specifics, and that each of these groups have done, and I'm very happy to share different things that have worked to make a difference through the time.
Yeah, that'd be great. I would love to talk about those things. Dimitra, you earlier mentioned some activities and some initiatives that you have for your employees during this time. Walk us through some of those.
Sure, Ebony. Tons of activities come from employees themselves, which is so wonderful to see. One of the big things that I think people miss about not being together is that social interaction. And so, when we've had a company that's only really had 3% of our workforce working permanently from home in the past. So when you go from 3% to 99.8%, you sort of say, wow, it's so vastly different. There's been quarantinis. There's been social activities where, a lot of, cooking classes and people didn't know how to cook. I mean, in New York, of course, most people actually don't know how to cook, and you go out a lot. And just teaching people life skills. We've found that there's been a lot of wonderful coaching sessions as well. We have a manager coaching session, we call it Manager Support Network, where they come together and each can come for some support during this time. We've had children, older children reading to younger children from different families, which is wonderful as well, and trying to help people some breaks, because we're also a lot of parents are actually teachers right now as well. They're homeschooling their kids. They're dealing with no childcare, no school, no activities, no social interaction for their children. So there's been a lot of creativity, which is fabulous. And of course, we did a survey of our employees back in March, which really helped us understand what they needed and what was working and what wasn't working. And it's good to see that we're doing well and they're doing well. I think the big key thing here is the sustainability of this. It's fine for a short time. The real issue is this is going to take a lot longer, and particularly in New York and in India and in Pakistan and some of the countries that we're in, and obviously the UK as well. It's going to be longer. And how do you sustain and support people beyond the 3-4 months? And that's the big question. That's what we're working on.
That's a good point, Dimitra. I mean, we don't know how long this is going to last for, and how do you deal with that kind of fatigue setting in? Siobhan, what are some of the things that have worked for you during this period?
Well, in addition to some of the things that Dimitra has talked about there, about people, grassroots activity and supporting one another, there's been some good things that have come from the centre of the organisation that people have found very useful very early on with the communication materials. And we had them under a number of different pillars: keeping fit, keeping connected, keeping motivated, keeping performing, and keeping developing. So then there was more information that we keep sharing with people to keep each of those things alive as we're going through, to appreciate, to have some gifts of appreciation in where the core of our company started in the Netherlands. So you won't be surprised to hear that flowers and seeds and gifts of growing were things that people really appreciated. So, and as part of that, staying very well connected with our charitable roots and making sure that people that we have supported through when times were good, that they keep having strong connections with us and the communities that we support and work with. So that is kept strong at the heart recognising that emergency food banks, for example, are really super struggling. They've got an enormous number of people calling upon them, but they are the people who are least likely to be getting support at this moment in time because of some of the other shortages and difficulties. So we've tried to keep that very central in there. The issues about working from home and childcare are very real, aren't they? Because it's tough to be able to keep switched on and keep doing what you need to do, particularly for very time-bound activities. For some of us, working earlier, working later, moving our day around can work. For other people, that's not as possible with the services that they need to provide. So we've had to be very mindful of that. What I'm really loving is the opportunity for us to see our whole people, each person as a real life, fully rounded human being, and to be able to talk about that, to be able to understand people's full lives to the extent, of course, that they're willing and able to share that. Sometimes it just happens quite naturally. And I'm loving the fact that it's opening into our homes, into our lives in a way that we would never have done before. I think it's been extremely important that senior people have been role modelling good behaviours and walking that talk. And so, for example, very straightforward things about taking leave and taking proper breaks. And I say, proper breaks, not being that person that says, well, I'm on a break and I'm taking some time off, but then continues to send messages or contact people. That sends a very strong message to other people that actually it's not okay for them to take that time. So you say it is, but then you behave like that. So I'm constantly keyed up and switched on, which is really bad. We won't be able to sustain good mental health and physical health through this time if that's the sort of behaviour that we indulge in.
I think that's such a beautiful point, Siobhan, about this period really breaking down barriers. And in the professional relationship, certainly Zoom calls like this, you're in a colleague's home. Certainly at my workplace, my colleagues have been more transparent about caring for sick family members needing to take mental health breaks. And I think that's been a really positive part of this otherwise, really difficult period. You also said something about leadership that I was really interested in. We did a Connections for Change interview the other day with Dr. Ian Meredith, very famous Monash alumni. He's the Chief Medical Officer at Boston Scientific. And he spoke about some of the leadership principles that have been really guiding him. And he spoke about transparency and being willing to admit when you don't know what's going on and deferring to the people around you. Siobhan, I would love to hear some of the real core leadership principles that you have been employing during this period and what's gotten you through as a leader.
Yeah, indeed, because it's the absolute most important time for us to practice what we preach. There's so much stuff that we would have learned about, heard about, but if you don't actually do it, it makes no difference whatsoever. It doesn't matter how many books you've got on your shelf or what you studied at Monash years ago. If you're not actually applying it, your people won't feel it, and you also won't survive. That the hero model of leadership really doesn't fit with most, if not all, modern workplaces. So we really need to get past that and then work towards properly delegating, really understanding the skills, the abilities, the talents in our team, and letting people get on and do what they're good at, getting out of other people's way, not being busy for the sake of being busy, getting past our own egos and getting down into, well, what actually am I good at? What am I here for? My team and the people I work with, what are they here for? And allowing those people to do that. So we need to get past busyness. We need to get into true outcome-focused management and leadership. And that's the sort of thing that will enable us to keep this so-called new normal, but to keep that moving into the future, to enable us to take the best out of being flexible and keep that going. Because if I measure my people properly on what they actually achieve, and I measure myself on that, then I'm going to get past those age-old questions of, yeah, but where did she do it? And how long did it take? That should matter far less than it used to. I've been saying that for a good 30 years now, so I'm enormously grateful for the awful gift, but a gift that crisis has brought to us.
I love that. Dimitra, how about you?
You know, I love Siobhan. It is a gift. It's a weird gift, right? You know, I feel that in addition to what you're saying, the compassion piece, you know, finally we're seeing so much compassion come out, you know, from our leaders. And I think it's wonderful. Like it used to be like a thing. No one showed, you know, it was only when someone died or was when someone was ill. But, you know, the compassion that comes with a crisis and the huge amount of empathy that leaders are showing today that you really didn't see some of this, you know, as much in the workplace. And I think that this is the wonderful thing that we're seeing in our leaders. And of course, you do have, you know, managers that are struggling. You know, they themselves are in the situation that their staff and their teams are in. And so that helps because they're actually struggling. You know, a lot of our employees in India have multi-generational families living together in spaces, and you know, they're just dealing with so much. And we've had, you know, people that couldn't have access to food, you know, basic needs that they couldn't have access. Struggling with an employee that couldn't get medicine for his mother because they were in lockdown. And so, you know, had to, you know, people have been incredibly resourceful, which I think is fabulous, reaching out to one another and really truly take the time to know each other. And it's so, for the first time, we're not apologising for the background noise that someone's having, or, you know, the keyboard's down there, my husband's putting the dishes away, I can just hear it. You know, you don't have to apologise anymore because it's all absolutely acceptable. So the first time we're actually we knew that we could work from home effectively, but not a lot of people really believed it. Now everyone believes it can be done. And there's our fire alarm that's just gone off in the kitchen, so sorry. It's just one of the things. Like you know, we're finally saying it's acceptable to be the real self, and to show vulnerability. Like we're all, at the end of the day, we're all vulnerable, and we're all real people. And it's finally good to see that play out on a massive scale.
Look, it's really nice to hear a positive takeaway from this experience and how, again, that this is encouraging people to be real in the workplace. I think that's a really beautiful thing, and encouraging people to be vulnerable and honest about their situations at home. I'm wondering what conversations you're having in your organization right now about permanent changes that this might bring in terms of flexible working hours, and how we will stay connected when we can't meet face to face. Siobhan, what about you?
Yeah, it's super interesting because immediately before all of the, you know, we went into lockdown, and as the situation was changing around the world, I was still having conversations with managers and with leaders about what suddenly feels very old world now, but the way that we judge talent, for example, and the needs that our people have and how we judge people, and, you know, who gets promoted, who gets the opportunities and so forth, which obviously, as we know, is fundamental to really having an effectively a truly inclusive and diverse workforce. It feels like some of those, through this terrible situation we're living through, but that people get to see another way that things can be. So it was an article of faith that all investors had to be together so that we could effectively manage their activity from the point of a risk scenario, because obviously we're heavily regulated, and that's paramount to our being, but also for the opportunity to be able to share ideas and so on. We've been able to see that the huge volatility of the markets notwithstanding, that isn't, being separated from one another isn't a barrier to managing the risks. It isn't a barrier to effectively sharing ideas and being able to then bring that value to our investors and to our clients and customers, which has been remarkable and marvellous, because that was always something that would be thrown up about doing things differently. And like Dimitra's workforce moving from being heavily office-based to being disparate and separated. But I've always been fascinated by this question, as Australians who are in different parts of the world, we ourselves have been keeping connections with our family and our loved ones in a different part of the world for years. The people who came before us, when Europeans came to Australia from different parts of the world and were incredibly separated and perhaps never got to go back to where they were, they still maintained relationships, not always, and they were in a different form, but it is possible. So one of the things we all have to do now is recognise that we must sharpen those relationship skills. Again, they don't happen by chance. You've got to give them energy. You've got to give them attention. And for things to keep going, like the great leadership practice we're seeing now, compassion, connection, and so forth, that has to be a very active part of what we each do in order to maintain that. So we've spent a lot of our time and energy helping managers and leaders to be able to do that, to see what good looks like, and then to give them the practical skills for that. In my own HR team, we kicked off at the beginning of the year, just before all this happened, but an HR effectiveness program for all of our global HR staff, which turns out to have been marvellously prescient, because we took the opportunity to do that for everybody coming together in this remote way. And still, we've been able to show one another that it's still possible to learn great skills and to practice those skills and to stay really connected with our people and one another through these different ways.
That's wonderful. It's so great that your organisation has been able to take away those learnings from this time. Dimitra, is the same true at S&P Global? What's your organisation doing looking forward?
No, absolutely. I think Siobhan's right. And I think the additional things, just not to sort of labour on the same points, but some additional things. Obviously, the real estate footprint is going to change. Right? We're in 33 different countries. And, we have over 78 offices, so we have multiple offices, obviously in countries. And the fact is, we don't need that much real estate footprint anymore, and that can be an incredibly liberating thing. It'll save a ton of money, and that in turn obviously then helps our customers, right? So pricing changes and the whole thing. So I think that's a wonderful learning here, and I love the fact that managers always say, like, it can't be done, the jobs can't be done from home, they can't be done from home, and all of a sudden they can be done from home. I mean, in our Platts business, we have a process called the market on close, which is we basically price the commodity. And we never thought, that we could do that so well for so long. And, it's fantastic to see that, our teams are pricing the markets successfully. From Houston and from London, and S&P 500, the Dow Jones indices. We're calculating those indices successfully from our home offices, and some of us are in our hallways, and some of us and some of the people are in their basements in Connecticut, and it's wonderful to see. I think definitely a couple of things that I think we also learn, apart from the real estate, the obvious one, is the decision making is so much quicker. It's so much quicker. Things that used to take like a week or 2 weeks, it's just happening at a snapshot now. I just love the fact that we used to preach about agility, and now we absolutely living agility in its true sense. And I think that really has been refreshing. So a lot of wonderful things have come from this, and I think a lot of managers are figuring out that this is also a defining moment for them. How they operate today is really going to be how people are going to remember them in their teams. So they have to really, think about how they show up every day and how they support their people across the globe. And I think, again, great learnings. We're definitely implementing and thinking through what this new future looks like. I know the new normal has sort of been saturated, right? But the new future, the new way, we're rethinking everything about processes, our operating model, how we work with our customers. So it's not just the employee base that we're thinking through, we're thinking about the whole operating model of the company.
Look, I think the two biggest takeaways for me from this conversation is more empathetic and compassionate leadership, and also more flexible workplaces. So I think while we're all separated, those are two really good things. And I think this is a fitting way to close our Connections for Change interview. Thank you, Dimitra and Siobhan, for giving us your insights and being so generous with your time, and what you're seeing on the ground in both New York and London. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Ebony.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you.